This deep dive is powered by Growth Suite. Growth Suite helps you to run smart discount campaigns on your store. Test it for free on your Shopify store. Just land on the Shopify App Store now and test it for free. Welcome to the deep dive.
Okay, so think about this. You're scrolling through your phone, maybe browsing online, watching presentations, just constantly taking in information, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's nonstop. Social media, emails, ads. It's a flood.
Exactly. And in that, tidal wave of stuff, what actually makes you stop? What grabs your attention? And more importantly, what do you actually remember later?
Yeah, that's the huge challenge today, isn't it? Our attention spans are, well, they're limited, and everything's fighting for a tiny slice of it. Standing out isn't just nice anymore, it's kind of essential.
Totally essential. And that's why today we're doing a deep dive into this really fundamental psychological thing that explains why some things just leap out at us while others just, fade away. It's called the von Restorff Effect, or sometimes called the isolation effect. Same idea. We've been looking at this great article focused on e-commerce psychology, which really breaks it down. But honestly, the ideas apply way beyond just selling stuff online.
Right. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to pull out the key insights from this source material. We want to understand this powerful effect, why being different, being isolated, matters so much, and crucially, how you can actually use this knowledge.
Yeah, how you can use it intentionally to make your message or your product or just the main point you're trying to make, well, unmissable.
Get ready, because grasping this one concept could really shift how you approach getting noticed in, well, all the noise.
That's a powerful one.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning then. What is the von Restorff effect at its core?
So in simple terms, it's our built-in tendency. We naturally notice and we tend to remember things that are distinctive, things that are unusual compared to everything else around them.
Okay, so if I have a big pile of white socks and there's one bright pink one in there, my eyes just go straight to the pink one.
Exactly that. Or, you're looking for your friend in a crowd and they're the only one wearing a bright yellow hat. Boom. Your brain locks onto that difference instantly. It violates the pattern.
Huh. It feels almost simple. Like common sense, maybe. Where did this actually come from as a formal idea?
Well, it feels simple because it's so fundamental. It was first properly documented way back in 1933 by a researcher named Hedwig von Restorff. She did these experiments. Now they seem classic.
What kind of experiments?
Usually involving lists. So she'd show people lists where most items were similar, maybe a list of 3-letter syllables or just black numbers. But then smack in the middle, there'd be one item that was totally different, like a number instead of syllables, or a word printed in bright red ink.
And people remembered the different one.
Way more often, yeah. Significantly more. What she showed wasn't just a neat trick. It was evidence that this isn't random. It's a core feature of how our brains actually process and, importantly, prioritize information.
Which brings us right back to today, doesn't it? Because our modern world is that long list of similar items. Everything kind of blends together until something manages to be different.
Precisely. We are just bombarded constantly. Think about the sheer number of ads you glimpse, the emails piling up, the posts scrolling past. It's immense. So if something doesn't immediately signal, hey, I'm different, it's probably just going to get lost. Not even consciously ignored, just missed.
Yeah, filtered out. The source article we looked at really emphasized how broad this is, too. It's not just marketing.
Oh, not at all. The article mentions its relevance in marketing and UX/UI design, obviously, but also things like education, public policy communication.
Yeah.
Anywhere you need information to stick.
And it actually works, quantifiably.
Yeah, the impact can be pretty dramatic. The research cited in the source suggests that when you properly isolate an element, make it distinct, you can boost recall rates by, get this, 200 to 300% compared to items that just blend in.
Whoa, okay. 200 to 300%. That's huge. That's not a minor tweak. That changes everything.
That's a massive difference.
Yeah.
Especially when attention is the currency.
So if it's that powerful, let's dig into the why. You said it's about how our brains process things. What's actually going on in there? What's the science behind this?
Right. This is the really fascinating part. So your brain isn't just passively recording everything. It's actively scanning, filtering, prioritizing. One big mechanism is called selective attention.
Okay.
Our brains are basically hardwired to notice novelty, things that contrast with the background, anything that deviates from the expected pattern. You can think of it almost like a survival mechanism from our evolutionary past.
It's like noticing the one weird berry on the bush or the rustle in the grass.
Exactly. Something unusual could mean food, or it could mean danger. So Paying attention to the different thing was really advantageous. That wiring is still there.
So our brain has this built-in anomaly detector running.
Pretty much, yeah. And when that detector flags something as distinct, the brain allocates more cognitive resources to process it. This leads to what's called enhanced memory encoding.
Meaning?
Meaning because your brain paid more attention, worked a bit harder on that unique item, it creates a stronger memory trace. It's literally encoded more deeply, making it easier to retrieve later.
So it grabs your attention and makes you remember it better. Double win.
Double win. Another related concept is schema violation. Our brains create these mental shortcuts, these models or schemas for how things usually are. Socks are usually paired, houses on a street often look similar.
Right, it patterns we expect.
When something breaks that pattern, the pink sock, the bright purple house, it violates the schema. That violation triggers deeper processing because your brain goes, hang on, this doesn't fit the template. What's going on here?
It snaps you out of autopilot thinking.
Perfectly put. And there are emotional drivers, too. Things that surprise us, make us curious, maybe even slightly startled. That emotional salience, they get processed more deeply. And then there's just basic perceptual contrast, simple differences in color, size, shape, sound. Our senses pick those up immediately.
The source mentioned something about dual process theory, too. System 1 and System 2.
Yeah, ties in nicely. Distinctiveness often grabs that fast, intuitive System 1 attention instantly. Whoa, that's different. But it can also engage the slower, more deliberate System 2 thinking if the difference is intriguing or requires figuring out why it's different.
Interesting. So it can be both an instant reaction and trigger deeper thought. And is there actual, brain evidence for this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The source mentions studies using brain imaging, fMRI, EEG. They actually see increased activity in brain regions associated with attention and memory, like the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. When people encounter these distinct items compared to the mundane ones.
You can literally see the brain lighting up more.
You can. And there's even talk about the amygdala getting involved if there's an emotional component and the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine, the interest or reward chemical when something novel pops up.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just a theory, it's biologically rooted. Our brains are physically designed to react to distinctiveness.
They really are, which is fascinating in itself. But like you said, the real power comes when you figure out how to put that knowledge to work.
Right. Let's shift gears then. How are people actually using this von Restorff effect out there in the real world? Where do we see it making an impact?
It's everywhere, honestly, once you start looking for it. Marketing and advertising is probably the most obvious place.
Like those Apple product launches you mentioned?
Exactly. The extreme minimalism.
Yeah.
One single, beautifully lit product against a vast empty backdrop. Nothing else competes for your eye. That's pure isolation.
Can't miss it.
Nope. Or think simpler, everyday stuff. Call to action buttons on websites. That bright orange buy now button on Amazon everyone talks about. Or a vibrant green sign up free button on a mostly white page. The contrast makes it jump out.
It pulls your eye right to the action you're supposed to take.
Precisely. The source highlighted Amazon's success with that button as a key factor in conversions. Big campaigns use it too. Remember Coca-Cola's Share a Coke with personalized names on bottles?
Oh yeah, those stood out like crazy on the shelf.
Because they were different from the usual rows of identical logos. Nike's Just Do It, often just bold white text on a simple background. Highly distinct, incredibly memorable. And the source specifically mentioned the Dove Real Beauty campaign.
Right, you said that had a huge sales increase.
A reported 60% increase. Part of that success came from deliberately breaking the standard, perfect model schema of beauty advertising at the time. It was distinct, it resonated, and it got noticed.
60%. That's incredible proof of concept. What about outside of ads, like user experience?
Hugely important in UX and UI design. Think about pricing tables online. Often one plan is highlighted maybe with a different background color, a border, a most popular label. That's isolation guiding your choice.
Making the preferred options stand out.
Yeah. Or mobile apps. Notifications that use a distinct vibration pattern, a unique sound, or a little animation to make sure you notice that specific alert among all the others. The source had that great example of the Trip airline app.
The one that increased engagement.
By 26%. Yeah, just by using color contrast effectively to isolate important flight updates.
Yep.
It made crucial info unmissable in a potentially cluttered interface.
Makes sense. What about education?
Definitely used there too. Simple things like bolding or coloring key terms in a textbook. Or in e-learning, using interactive elements, maybe an unexpected animation or a quiz question that pops up differently.
Keeps you engaged.
Exactly. The source even noted that in corporate training, using surprising examples or striking visuals can boost how much people remember by up to 65%. We recall the unusual.
I can believe that. I definitely remember the one weird story from that otherwise dull compliance training I had to do.
Huh. See? It works. Even in things like public policy. Think about safety warnings, those bright yellow and black stripes, or red hazard labels. They use high contrast for a reason. Or a public health campaign isolating a single critical statistic visually to make it hit home.
So it really boils down to using some kind of contrast, visual, auditory, maybe even storytelling to make the important bits stand out from the rest.
That's the essence of it, yeah. It's incredibly versatile. But knowing it's used is one thing. How can someone listening actually implement it effectively?
Good question. What are the practical strategies? How do you actually do isolation well?
Well, it often starts with basic design principles. Contrast is the big one, using differences in color, size, shape, spacing, topography. Even negative space, like the Apple example, using emptiness to isolate something.
But you have to be careful not to overdo it.
Right. Absolutely. The source makes a key point here. The contrast needs to be noticeable, significant enough to work, but not so jarring or chaotic that it just becomes visual noise or feels unpleasant. It's a balance.
Guiding the eye, not attacking it.
Exactly. In digital stuff, motion is another tool. Even a subtle animation can draw the eye effectively. And then there's what the source called contextual incongruity,
Meaning,
placing something unexpected but relevant in a familiar context. Like the example they gave of an ad showing a modern smartwatch photoshopped into a classic Renaissance painting. It makes you stop and look because it doesn't fit the expected pattern.
clever. That forces a double take. The source had a good actionable tip related to this, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah.
A really simple but useful exercise. Look at whatever you're working on your website, an email, a presentation slide, even product packaging. Ask yourself, is there one thing here I absolutely need people to see or remember first? If the answer is no, or everything feels equally important, then you probably have an opportunity. Figure out what that single most important element should be, and then brainstorm ways to make only that element stand out using contrast or maybe incongruity.
That's a great focusing exercise. Forces you to prioritize.
It really does.
Yeah.
Beyond pure visuals, you can think about content frameworks too. The serial positioning effect is closely related. People tend to remember the first thing, primality, and the last thing, recency, in a sequence better than the middle.
So structure matters. Start strong, end strong.
Pretty much. Another technique is narrative isolation. If you have a lot of dense factual information, breaking it up with a short, compelling story or a vivid anecdote makes that story element incredibly memorable. Our brains just latch onto narratives.
We're wired for stories.
We are. And in physical environments, you can even use sensory cues, like how some retail chains use a unique signature scent in their stores. Abercrombie & Fitch is a classic example. That smell is distinctive. It isolates the experience in your memory.
Ah, right. Makes the brand stick. Now, with all this power to grab attention, the source mentioned ethics too. That feels important.
Crucial, because you can misuse this. The goal should be to use isolation to highlight genuinely important, useful, or valuable information for the user, not to trick them or mislead them by making something deceptive stand out.
Like highlighting a hidden fee in tiny print but making the low base price enormous.
Exactly the kind of manipulation to avoid. It's about clarity and help, not deception. Accessibility is another key ethical point the source raised. Don't rely only on color contrast, because that excludes people with color vision deficiency.
Good point. Combine color with shape or size differences.
Yes, use multiple cues. And be aware of cultural sensitivity. Colors, symbols, even certain types of humor or incongruity can mean very different things in different cultures. What stands out positively here might be offensive or meaningless elsewhere.
So, responsible use means being thoughtful, inclusive, and user-centered.
Absolutely. The best implementations feel natural. They gently guide attention where it's most needed, rather than aggressively demanding it.
We've covered the science, the strategies, the ethics, but let's talk hard evidence again. Does the data really consistently back this up across different applications?
It seems to. We've already touched on several strong case studies mentioned in the source: Nike's branding, Dove's 60% sales lift, the Umitrip app's 26% engagement boost, Amazon's conversion gains from their button. These are real-world business results linked to applying distinctiveness principles.
And the original research.
Von Restorff's own studies back in the 30s showed recall advantages of around 35–50% for the isolated items. More modern psychology experiments, using tools like the Ray Auditory Verbal Learning Test, or AVLT, consistently find that distinctive words or items in lists are remembered better, even, as the source notes, among elderly populations where memory might generally be weaker.
Wow, so even when memory is challenged, distinctiveness still provides a significant edge.
It appears so. It really underlines how fundamental this effect is to our cognitive architecture. Yeah. And remember that 2019 study the source mentioned?
The one suggesting it's automatic.
Yeah. That implies it's not just us consciously deciding, oh, I should remember the different one. Our brain is largely doing it for us, automatically prioritizing that standout information.
That's powerful. It makes the effect seem very reliable. But, okay, no technique is perfect. What are the potential downsides, the challenges or limitations we need to watch out for?
Good point. It's definitely not foolproof. The biggest danger, mentioned clearly in the source, is overuse. If you try to make too many things stand out, multiple flashing banners, different colors everywhere, every other word bolded.
It just becomes a mess, visual chaos.
Exactly. Creates cognitive overload. Nothing is actually distinct anymore because everything is shouting for attention. It completely backfires. Another risk is desensitization. If you use the exact same trick all the time, like always using a bright red button, people get used to it. It loses its novelty, its power to stand out.
So you need to be selective.
Very selective. The source puts it well. Ask yourself, what is the one most critical thing the user needs to see or remember right now? Focus the isolation effect there.
Makes sense. What other limitations?
Context matters hugely. What works brilliantly in a print ad might fall flat or be annoying in a mobile app. And audience variability is key. What stands out as cool or different to Gen Z might be completely missed or even disliked by an older demographic. Cultural differences play a huge role here too.
So know your audience, know your medium.
Definitely. And finally, measurement can be tricky. In a complex design or campaign, isolating the specific impact of the von Restorff effect from all the other variables it tells, the copy, the overall design, the offer itself can be difficult.
Like, was it the highlighted pricing tier or just that the price itself was really good?
Right. It's hard to untangle sometimes. The source suggests using A/B testing, where you change only the isolation element, like button color, to get clearer data. And maybe thinking about longer-term recall tests, not just immediate clicks, to measure the memory aspect.
So, careful application, testing, and focusing on the single most important element seem key to avoiding the pitfalls.
That sums it up well. It requires thoughtful strategy, not just random highlighting.
Looking forward then, how is this effect likely to evolve? What's next for the von Restorff effect?
Well, technology is pushing things forward, as you'd expect. The source points to things like AI personalization. Imagine systems that learn what kind of contrast or novelty you specifically respond to best, and then dynamically adjust interfaces or ads to maximize distinctiveness just for you.
Oh, hyper-personalized attention grabbing.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, augmented and virtual reality open up whole new dimensions for making things stand out in 3D space. And biometric feedback using eye tracking or even EEG brainwave monitoring to test in real time how effectively different isolation techniques capture actual attention.
Moving beyond clicks to measure actual brain response.
It's exactly. Getting much more precise data. There's also interesting cross-disciplinary work happening. Neuroscience keeps refining our understanding of the brain mechanisms involved. Behavioral economics studies how isolation influences not just memory, but actual choices and perceived value, like making one option seem like a special deal just by presenting it differently.
Like highlighting the limited time offer.
Precisely. And alongside all this power, there's a growing conversation, thankfully, around ethics and regulation, developing clearer guidelines for using attention-grabbing techniques responsibly and educating consumers about how these cognitive biases work.
So people understand why certain things catch their eye.
Yeah. The future likely involves more sophisticated, data-driven ways to make things stand out, but hopefully balanced with a stronger focus on user well-being and transparency.
That's a hopeful note. Okay, let's try to wrap this up. We've gone deep into the von Restorff effect. What are the main takeaways?
I think the first is just how fundamental it is. It's not some obscure marketing trick. It's basic human cognition. Our brains are literally built to notice and remember things that are different.
Right, and using that strategically isolating key information is incredibly powerful for cutting through the noise. But, crucially, it needs balance.
Yes. Too much isolation creates confusion, defeats the purpose. Too little, and you remain invisible. It's about finding that sweet spot.
We've seen it has proven applications everywhere: marketing, UX, education, policy. The list goes on.
And the most effective uses feel natural. They guide attention subtly rather than screaming for it. They enhance the experience. They don't detract from it.
The source also gave us that handy implementation checklist near the end. Maybe we can quickly recap that.
Good idea. First, audit your stuff. Look at your website, your content. Find the one thing that really needs to stand out.
Second, implement contrast. Use design color, size, motion, spacing, maybe that contextual incongruity to make it distinct.
Third, test it. Use A/B testing if you can. Measure the actual impact of making that element stand out. Does it work?
Fourth, make sure it enhances, not hurts. Does the distinctive element actually help the user and support your goals?
And fifth, crucially, prioritize accessibility and ethics. Make sure everyone can perceive it and that you're highlighting something genuinely important, not being manipulative.
That's a solid, practical checklist. And the final thought from the source really sticks with me.
Yeah, that in today's world, with just so much competing for our attention, being strategically distinctive isn't just like a nice-to-have advantage, it's becoming essential. Future success lies in blending that science of isolation with real empathy for the user.
Absolutely. And just to bring it back to the e-commerce focus of the source article, that growth tip was a perfect practical example.
Right. The idea that Shopify store owners can use tools like the Growth Suite app specifically to identify their best-selling products and then highlight those products on their store.
Making those winners stand out using the von Restorff effect.
Exactly. It guides customers toward items they're more likely to buy, leveraging this psychological principle for a tangible business outcome. A really smart application.
A perfect way to put theory into practice. That wraps up our deep dive for today. This deep dive was powered by Growth Suite. Growth Suite helps you to run smart discount campaigns on your store. Test it for free on your Shopify store. Just land on the Shopify App Store now and test it for free.